Have you ever heard the phrase, live your own truth? Or maybe speak your own truth? It's a new phrase that's kind of popped up in recent years. And basically, to sum it up, it means like whatever is right to you, just live that and believe that and you'll be okay. And I'll do the same and we'll all be okay, right? We can define what is true and good for ourselves. But that's just not true. Genesis chapter 3 tells us that that's basically the thing that got us into our sin issue in the first place. Adam and Eve were deceived by the serpent because he said to them, did God actually say to you, you shall not eat of any tree in this garden? He let them redefine what God had already told them as truth. And that's what you and I often do when we fall into patterns of sin. Usually we don't make one big mistake on our own. We start to compromise a little bit here. Is that really what's right? Could it be better if I actually did this instead? And then we start to walk down these slippery slopes until eventually we are way down a path that we never intended to go down. That's what happens when we define our own truth. But there is a place we can find real truth. Jesus talks about that in John chapter 8. And we've talked about that this week. He says in verse 31, he said to the Jews who had believed in him, if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Not my own truth, not what I want to believe. Following the way of Jesus, following after his paths, what he defines as good and righteous, it isn't always easy. It doesn't always make sense right off the bat. We don't always comprehend things the way Jesus does. We don't always see the world the way he does. We sometimes have to die to ourselves. We have to die to ourselves in order to understand and to enter into this new kingdom living and mindset. None of us have a perfect theology of our own personal beliefs and preferences. That's just not what the Jesus following life is. If we all wanted this faith to just be off of what I prefer to do and what I prefer to believe, none of us would look like Jesus, because he's the ultimate example of humility and love and grace, and none of us are that on our own. If we want to abide in our own truth, then we're just going to find what our hearts lead us to, and that's destruction. But if we abide in Jesus, if we abide in the word who is Jesus, Jesus who is the word, if we abide in the written word that God has given us, if we abide in Jesus through prayer, if we abide in Jesus through divine revelation or through nature, if we abide in Jesus through what the Holy Spirit is speaking to you and I and teaching us, if we abide in Jesus in community, we will find the truth and it will set us free from the patterns of sin that so easily entangle us. It'll separate us, and it'll help us to get out of this water that our culture lives in of redefining truth and trying to figure out what is right and wrong and redefining all these things and creating confusion and chaos for ourselves. We can find true peace, true contentment in this life. If you notice our world, not just culture, just our world in general, always gets more and more chaotic, right? We're all seeking after peace, but then in the end, if we go after that our own ways, we just destabilize things even more. But God brings things back to its natural order. He brings things back to the way he had designed it and intended it to be. So if you and I seek his truth this week through his word, and we continue to it the rest of our lives, it will set you and I free. I pray and I hope that each of us can dive into Jesus as the word, abide in him this week, and allow his truth to lead in our hearts.